Mike.
That's Toya, and this is Tech Beats and
Bytes.
Bytes. So we are very excited today. We have the hottest topic for us.
Because we talked about it enough.
Yeah. So we have finally decided, as much as we talked to you all about transportation, traffic, the tri-county bubbles, and how people don't want to travel outside of their comfort zone, we thought that we would have a transit show, since that does actually deal with civil engineering and all those other things for you kids out there. STEM is much more than just technology and building apps. So if you could, we have our first three-peat guest. Chris Caines is back again. But if you guys could please just give a brief introduction, your name and what you do. Keep it at 2 minutes because we'll cover almost everything else with the questions.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Tara Crawford. I'm a senior planner with Broward County Transit. And so what that means basically is that I'm over all service planning functions.
In the mic.
Okay.
It's hard.
Should I read?
No, I know
Okay.
you want to look that way. It's cool. Go that way.
Okay.
There you
Service planning functions for the agency. That mainly means that I do route design, any kind of changes in alignment, new service, if there's going to be an elimination or truncation of service. I'm also over the express bus services for the agency. So I'm actually very passionate about it. And so hopefully they'll come through. And I think that transit overall is in a very good trend for South Florida overall in the next 10 years. So I hear some laughing, but I think it's going to be really exciting over the next couple of years. So we'll talk more about it later on.
To Broward and Dade County, who apologize in advance for everything that's about to be said. We're asking for the people. It's not really the reflections of Digital Grass's personal feelings.
It may be. Look,
Don't do that, Toya.
I'm just saying.
Go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Chris Caines. I am the Executive Director of the Miami Urban Future Initiative. It's a think tank type effort, partnership with Dr. Richard Floyd and the Creative Class, as well as FIU, funded generously by Knight Foundation. We're looking at the future of South Florida's economy. So we provide data-driven research around trends like talent attraction and retention, growth and competitiveness, affordability, and other key indicators of economic vitality, both from a prosperity standpoint, but also an inclusionary standpoint as well. Transit has not been an individual cutout of the Institute so far to date, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and something I'm looking forward to talking about here. She does all the hard work, and people like me just armchair quarterback and critique kind of the transit situation, but looking forward to the conversation today.
All right. So we will once again make this statement. None of these are direct opinions and emotions and or feelings of Digital Grass Innovation and Technology.
Disclaimer alert.
This is very personal. So it's okay. We can get the beer. It's a live show. This is going to be needed to make it through this show. All right. So y'all ready?
Yeah.
Go.
You want to ask the first question?
No, you go ahead.
What route is really working that you built? Because I just don't see it. So what's really going on with the transit of Broward? I mean, how much can you speak on Dade County, by the way? I know you're a professional.
So transit here is very political. Unlike other large metropolitan areas, there's one transit agency for the larger metropolitan area. So South Florida, of course, is going to be Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. Every county has a different transit agency. It has a different metropolitan planning organization, and that's actually a larger quasi-governmental organization that actually covers and does a lot of that governance and maintenance of the functions of transportation, climate control, all of that good stuff. And then there's actually two different layers of state agencies too, District 4 for the Florida Department of Transportation and also District 6. And so if you're looking at all those different groups, and then if you talk about Tri-Rail, which is the commuter rail that runs through all three of those agencies, it's a lot of different politics and agencies that gets them board.
How often do y'all actually talk to each other?
We talk a lot. So I talk to my peers at Palm Tran and Miami-Dade a lot. It is where it's like, we do have some routes that go into Miami-Dade and Palm Beach. And so with that, we do have coordination with those agencies at that point, making sure that there's not duplicative services, because obviously transit is not funded that well. It's poorly funded overall nationally. And so I think that's reflective, and I think that's something that we are trying to work on in the future. However, with that, we're trying to make sure that we're using our resources in the most efficient manner possible. And so I know you asked me what are some of the routes that I built. I've actually been with
No, I said which ones are actually
Work.
working. I think a lot of them have been built.
You did ask that. Okay, so some of the routes that are working well. So with Broward County, the reason why I feel like I was hired for that, because I actually came from consulting. So my background is really working on transit planning in general from a lot of different agencies across the nation. And so what I feel like I'm bringing to Broward County is actually have a 3-year plan for what I want to do. Because right now we're actually trying to build on a couple of technology components, making sure we get a lot of things that will help make sure that we're being more efficient when we're doing our routing and our service delivery. So making sure we get we're actually working on automated passenger counters, but just making sure that your county people that get on and off at each bus stop. And that's going to be important because it lets you know which stops or which areas are going to be most highly attended to, right? And then with that, we're also working on our real-time mobile tracking, making sure that there's convenience in people when you're riding the bus, that people actually know where the bus is, that we can get to the bus on time.
You still trumping me. You still haven't answered my question.
I'm not trumping you. I'm not. I'm getting to the whole point.
It's a lot of context.
With that, we're
gotta
doing
take
a whole
notes.
bunch. But government is slow. So one thing, government is slow, and I think that's
true.
something to be aware of. Something else that I'm going to be working on too, because also the procurement process is also very timely when you're dealing with money because it's coming from state, local, and federal funds.
Hundreds of millions of
So something
dollars.
that I'll be managing over the next 18 months, because it's going to take that long to get the scope, to get the procurement, to actually go out, to get the vendors to actually do the project. And so within that 18-month period, I'll be working on a comprehensive operational analysis, and that's going to be, we're actually looking at the exact snapshot of the system, and we're actually going to do a system redesign. It's going to be a lot of public involvement and engagement within the county of Broward County, within Broward County overall. And so with that, we're able to go look at some of the different areas within the county to go see what it is. And what my hope is that right now, Broward County is more based on coverage based, making sure that we have a lot of service over the different portions of the county, right? There's going to be some areas for people that know about Broward, like Weston or Parkland, some areas where transit might not be needed as much, or where you can allocate some of the resources better. And so something that I'm hoping that the study will find through the consultants that will be doing that COA is that maybe something that we can do to elevate Broward more for the future is to do more a network based, making sure we have more efficient service on the main corridors going through the county, connecting through Palm Beach and Miami-Dade. So I have a 3-year plan. I know it's a very long talk, but I'm very passionate about it. So I feel like, that's why I say just be patient. Overall, I think it's going to get better, but it's going to take time.
With your study, real quick question. Are you guys going to be getting feedback from the public?
Yes, we'll be doing a huge, extensive public involvement campaign.
Date. You have any dates for that?
Because I'm sure people want to come out and, speak
We
their
want to
piece.
come.
Yeah. No, do you live in Broward County?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, with that, again, that's probably not even going to be out until next fall. And so with that project is going to take
So this
about
project
12
alone
months.
is 3 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's going to take 3 years to
So
do,
18
to
months
get
just for the procurement scope. And then beyond that,
Well, 18 months, I feel like probably for the whole completion of
the study.
So the procurement process is
So
typically
traffic
about
can't get
9
better for at least 4 or 5 more
No,
years.
traffic is completely different from transit. So what you're talking about, you're probably talking about more, you probably want an actual somebody from an engineering
No,
department
we
here.
meant you, but hold on. Hold on.
I'm just saying, because we don't do signalized intersections and everything.
Right.
But I think that
but
is
just
something-
overall, I think
yes.
what he was probably talking about is that mass transit can help alleviate some of the
Okay.
congestion.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
Toya.
think that answer is actually a really good, very indicative of why some people get frustrated with public transportation, right? If you think about what the public sector has done for mass transportation over the last decade and compare that to something like a Lyft or an Uber, which went from nonsense words to verbs in the span of 5 years, talk about private sector disruption, this is why, right? I mean, you're hyping up. It's
this
real
is
tough.
the perfect
I
matchup.
think this is great.
I'm sorry.
And I'm not saying one's better than the other. And there's so many shortfalls and problems with privatizing transportation, right? Right now, they're heavily subsidized by venture capital. At some point, those subsidies stop.
Venture
Prices
capital
go up.
Ride sourcing.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And so at some point, those subsidies stop, and then all of a sudden, everything goes up through the roof.
Correct.
And if your ridership is down, like it has been in Miami over the last several years, then all of a sudden, you have no
sustainable.
public transit and expensive mass
Correct.
transit.
Correct.
What do you do, right? The bottom just falls out the market.
So that is very interesting. I think something that people don't realize is how important. Sorry.
No. We're going to let y'all do this.
I
Go.
think it's very important.
Actually, we
to
just
think-
going to moderate this town hall. Welcome to Digital Grass Town Hall Debate on Mass
Moderation.
Transit. We will just be moderating today.
But I think it's important starting to realize how many things that transit actually encompasses. So one of the reasons why I was actually drawn into transit is really because I'm like, I'm helping to save the world one person at a time, because transit is going to be the lifeline for a lot of people to get to work, to get to school, to get to groceries, to get to the medical doctors, to get to amusement or to the grocery stores. And so transit is going to be the lifeline for a lot of people that are transit captive. And those are people that are going to be economically sensitive areas or sensitive groups. And that's like low income. Typically, the low income population is going to be about $25,000 or below for a household. So if you look at the statistics,
all right, there she go.
Demographics and everything. I wanted to use those. And
Here
so,
they go.
looking at the median household income for Miami-Dade, it's about $44,000. Broward is going to be slightly higher, $52,000. Compare that to Florida at $48,000. Already, Miami-Dade is going to be performing worse than the state average, right? And then if you're looking at the threshold of what poverty is, which is based upon about 24,600, right? So looking at that as a baseline for what poverty is or what low income would be considered as, Miami-Dade is at 29.9%. So nearly 30% of the population of Miami-Dade overall is going to be under that medium household income that basically qualifies as poverty. Broward is going to be 22.6%. The statewide median is going to be 24.7%. So already you're seeing that Broward is performing slightly better than the state average, and Miami-Dade is going to be performing a little bit worse.
So hold on.
I say all that to say really quickly is that transit deals within social equity issues. So you think about gentrification, affordability, housing, land use, where all that develops, and also getting into ride sharing. So ride sharing is going to be Lyft or Uber or whatnot. And so if you look at ride sharing, so ride sharing is actually very complementary when it works with transit, when it's doing good. However, in some cases, nationally, they've done a lot of polling and studies. The demographic that's using ride sharing is going to be middle income, college educated. A lot of the majority of the people that use transit is going to be low income and minorities. And so already you're looking at that social equity issue, right? And so I think ride sourcing can be very well, and I think it's really good, especially for express services, more premium services, BRT. But it's not.
You
really
got to tell us what BRT is.
Sorry, I use a lot of acronyms. Thank you. Bus Rapid Transit or express buses. So if anybody uses the express buses from Broward to Miami-Dade, that's me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I like to hear positive things about them mostly. But
filter.
Or even using Brightline. So I know we have an individual that is a construction project manager. So I know for myself, my friend and I, we went to Brightline. We took.
Hold on, before you move there. Hold on.
Sorry.
Right, but you've answered like
passionate.
2 or 3
I get a lot of
questions in that whole answer.
Chris, before we move to the next question, would you like to give us your rebuttal?
Well, so I think it's interesting because there definitely is like economic tie-ins to this, right? But I think too often, especially in Miami, success gets couched as everybody having enough money to buy a car instead of public transit being good enough for everybody to opt into and want to use, right? And there's a big difference there. Point taken, absolutely. Lyft and Uber are classes of people who have smartphones and who are able to access certain systems. But they've also hit on to something with some of their express pool and pooling services. It is now at times cheaper than a bus.
Hold on.
Okay, and
we're gonna have to move on to the next question
it's not
before.
sustainable, but it's important to recognize, right?
It's not the last comment. We are gonna get back to it. Trust me. It's in here. We got a lot of notes to get through.
Okay.
So our next question to the candidates. Y'all sound like y'all running for a political office in here tonight.
Nice debate.
How much is transit really affecting our economy? Chris, we'll lead this to you first.
Sure. So I mean, it depends. It's going to depend who you ask and what you want to count into it, right? So if you think about, and I don't have specific numbers, I won't come with specific receipts, but if you think about the cost of transit as the economic productivity left on the table when somebody has to sit in traffic for an hour and a half each day from work, and you price their time of productivity out, multiply it by 3 times a day, 5 days a week, over the course of a 50-week year, you can get to some really high numbers pretty quickly, right? Because that's just dead time. You're not really able to produce. There's the cost to our roads and bridges, right? So if you have people just sitting in traffic, more use, more weight on the roads, you need to service them more, you need to do more with them. You have the tolls, people paying money in tolls that can't go to other stuff. So, I mean, it is severe. I think it's really important to recognize that in America, we subsidize the auto industry a lot, right? We make it cheaper to use a car often and easier to use a car often than we do to use public transportation. So, I mean, if you add all those up, you get to a point where it's more than just kind of what meets the eye, and there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and to your point, I am a fan of public transportation that works, because having lived in New York, I like being able to ride the subway and
Them
like
awnings,
do something
boy.
else. You know what I mean? So it's all about maximizing your time. So going back to the whole Brightline transit situation, what is sort of the projection for Brightline? Because we know that eventually they wanted to go to Jacksonville and then to Tampa. So do they sort of see that that will actually, you know, be a system where you will have that level of commuting, or is that more so for like trips? What's sort of the overall?
So Brightline is a private entity, and so Broward County Transit, which is what I work for, is the government. And so you're looking at private
Versus,
transportation
yeah.
versus public transportation. And so I think Brightline, I think, is trying to really, I'm not going to speak for Brightline, but I see this being a true connection for high-speed rail across the nation ultimately, in my opinion. So if you look at how many people have been to Europe or
Yep.
Asia and been on
The
the
rapid
trains
trains.
and the rapid trains.
Yep.
And so if you look at how that has been funded over there, it's heavily funded, like is very convenient, is actually built into the landscape and the land use over there in Europe and also Asia, right? However, here, the auto industry has been very dominant, and so it's not surprising that America is actually the largest nation in the world that has the highest private vehicle ownership. And so it's already, you're saying you're competing against the car, but it's also how the land use has been designed. New York is a very good example, and so is LA, because a lot of those areas have been designed around public transit, the subway or whatnot. And so you're looking at areas like Miami-Dade and Fort Lauderdale that really grew after the advent of the automobile vehicle in history. Is no surprise that we have really grown around the vehicle. It's not really going to be suited toward transit, right?
Right.
So I guess I want to say that. And then also with Brightline, there's actually supposed to be going to Orlando and then to Tampa. There hopefully will be legs to go to Jacksonville, but I think that's something that they'll be working on in the future. But
Yeah.
I think one thing that Brightline I'm actually excited about is that is actually, because they're able to do things with private money and not really rely on federal dollars and going through that whole environmental process, is actually, I think, going to help government transit, making sure that, you know, with the Tri-Rail being able to use the same rail lines that's already been improved upon.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be only advantageous at the end.
Yeah, and Brightline has a chance to really be a national model in a lot of ways. If I'm correct, it's the first private rail
Yeah.
line funded in the United
Correct.
States in 100 years, right?
Correct.
And so you have a situation like I heard from somebody today that when you go to space, you could see three things. You could see the Great Wall of China, you can see the Grand Canyon, and you could see the county line between Broward and Miami-Dade. Right? And so
Who said that, Chris?
And so Brightline
Clapback season. What?
Brightline provides a really unique opportunity to link together what is a rapidly growing mega region. It's the 8th largest region in the United States, and you have an opportunity to really unlock that full capital.
Yeah.
Brightline, you can go from downtown Miami now to downtown West Palm in 60 minutes on mass transportation. That is a breakthrough, right? The challenge, of course, is, and not to get too deep in the weeds, when you have a private entity running transportation, you have a company running transportation. You have profits that need to be derived
Right.
from transportation in a way that we don't necessarily have experience with or models with in the modern era. So Brightline, for example, in Florida East Coast, like this is all publicly available, they own the land around the stations. So ideally, they're profitable with the transit line, but even if that doesn't end up being a very lucrative business, they own all the land around the Palm Beach station. That just became a lot more valuable now that there's a train that will take you down to downtown Miami in 60 minutes. What happens, let's say, if they decide to build it up and then they move on from it, they flip it, they sell to somebody else. The train line isn't making as much money anymore. then what happens? Do they have enough incentive to keep running it? I don't know. I don't
Or
know
does it
business.
become
I haven't
dead
opened their
rail?
books. It becomes a unique set of circumstances that we just
Yeah.
haven't had to consider in the modern era. And so it's an incredible opportunity and incredible connectivity, but it also comes with a lot of unanswered questions. And I think that too often when we see big infrastructure projects like this, we look at them as absolute goods or absolute bads instead of tools that can be mobilized, positively, negatively, or somewhere in between.
Yeah. No, very good point.
I think that ties into, so between you two, either one of you can take the question. When do you see, or when will, or what is a real solution to our transit problem?
Well, we know she has a 3-year plan
But
for Broward.
we want to hear
Look.
more about the plan, though.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Okay.
And then I want to hear and then after you do that, Chris, if you could, in context, could you tell us about the recent study that you did this weekend for your 2-hour and 15-minute trip? So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you asked that question, actually. And so Broward County, who all lives in Broward County? Raise your hands. Okay, awesome. So on June 5th, the Broward County Board of Commissioners, they're actually going to be voting on a penny surtax on the ballot language. It's something that they're actually still working on. It's going to be finalized. And so this is going to be a huge transportation plan that's going to last about 30 years. It's going to touch on transportation, so making sure people are in private vehicles are getting to places faster, working on connecting different sidewalks, looking at traffic signalization, which costs a lot of money. And then it's also going to be doing a portion of transit too, like funding the system. And so with this, we hope it's going to pass by in November if it goes to the ballot, if they vote for it on June 5th. It's going to be hugely advantageous to actually help build the system that I'm hoping that will be ready for, like the plan will be ready for in like 3 years. We have a huge plan, like what we're going to be doing, improving different bus routes, connecting to different places like the American Dream Mall, making more connections down to Miami-Dade and Palm Beach County, extending more service headways. A lot of people like using transit. They want faster headways, faster connections, more convenience, making sure we get better buses, making sure it's going to be a better passenger experience by providing that better type of service that we would have with an actual stable funding source. And so I think that's something that's really coming along. And then also for people that drive, you'll be making sure that these different intersections that you have, they're going to be better times, that way the traffic is going to be moving a lot quicker too, which is better for cars and for buses.
Right. So will there be more express bus lanes? Because I know, like in Miami-Dade, I know you're not familiar with Miami-Dade that much, but for
Yeah.
example, between like South Dade and Dadeland, there's an express bus lane. So that helps a lot of people who are down south to get to the Dadeland station and catch the Metro Rail to come into downtown.
So express lanes or express buses?
Well, it's an express lane with express
It's a bus.
bus.
It's a
It's a
busway.
busway.
It's a busway. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that's
Because I don't
more
think
of an
that really exists in
That is
Broward,
the-
per
no.
se.
The busways do not exist in Broward County. The express lanes, that's actually a Florida Department of Transportation project right now, continuing the express lanes that are on 95 up to Palm Beach County. I know that Miami-Dade has a lot of plans, and I'm not too keen on that. I've attended some meetings, but I'd rather not speak on it because it's not really my jurisdiction.
I understand.
But I do know that they are planning on allowing for better transportation connections overall.
You have to find a way to invest in bus rapid transit. I
Absolutely.
really genuinely believe that.
Money.
Yeah, but the problem is, so in like mega regions, so like the South Florida mega region right now, once you get to 5-6 million people, you can't physically build enough roads for people to get around on them. You have to have robust public transportation to have any kind of circulation of transportation. We are now at that point. So don't know what needs to get done. I mean, I have ideas about what needs to get done, but I think there are a lot of different avenues that can be going there. But we need to start investing in public goods, and we need to do it yesterday. And because we can't do it yesterday in our time machine, we need to do it today. And the lack of political will and the lack of visioning has really put us in a really challenging situation that is only going to compound and only going to get worse if we don't address it now.
Chris, could you tell us about your your Instagram live experience that you shared over the weekend?
Yeah, so I really genuinely do believe in the product of public transportation. I think it is very important to use, especially those who are able to do it. It's, of course, harder if you have kids. It's harder if you live outside the urban core, but I don't neither of those statements apply to me. And so I take public transit everywhere. I took it from South Beach to the hammocks. I took it from South Beach out to FIU. And I can tell you, it took me 2 hours and 15 minutes with everything going reasonably well to get from South Beach to Sweetwater.
How many miles is that?
28, 30 miles. By comparison, you can go from, again, downtown Miami to downtown West Palm in 60 minutes with Brightline now.
Right.
The fact that our north-south connectivity is taken such a step forward with something like Brightline, but our east-west is still so lacking, is really sad. It's especially interesting, though, because Miami and the institute I work for is actually going to be coming out with a report around this, but Miami is a global city and has really good external connectivity. We have an incredible port. We have an incredible airport. In some ways, it is actually...
Which airport is incredible?
It
Fort
is
Lauderdale?
It is
He's
actually...
saying Miami.
Miami. So it is...
Debatable, but
it
okay.
is actually... you can imagine a situation, it is faster to fly somewhere than it
Than to take
is
the bus.
to take a bus across
Yeah.
the county. Right? So...
You're right.
You can get to New York in like 3
So
hours.
you could have got to Cuba and back in the same time it took for you to get to
So
Sweetwater.
if I had a chartered
Right.
plane, yes, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like this.
No, that's all right. That's
Miami has
American
this-
Airlines.
has this incredible external connectivity, and we've invested and we've decided to make these public assets very robust. But we haven't done a comparable job internally
Transit, yeah.
in terms of mass transit options.
It's
Yeah.
just one of those things we talked about. Sometimes I feel like we care more about the outside than we care about the people that are actually here.
Correct.
I hear a lot more about, being a gateway to South
Right.
America versus just being a gateway to our own people.
and being a bridge.
Yeah.
The east-west thing is serious.
Yeah, right?
And then
I mean,
how we
'cause you
treat
have a
them
lot
when
of
they come
people.
here.
When I
Right.
know that I can ride my bike and get to the beach faster than I can by taking a car
Right.
just
Or
because
even
of
the
the
trolley
traffic.
system within like the Brickell, Wynwood, that whole system, it's slow. Even now, and it's been around for how long? Of like 5-6 years or so?
I am glad you brought it up, though, because actually trolley ridership is one of the few areas of mass transportation where I actually think the city of Miami and some of the other local municipalities are doing reasonably well. Trolley ridership has been up year over year,
okay.
and people are using it. The challenge is that it's so regionally based that it's good for a small circle, but it doesn't connect to the
Outside.
larger grid, or if it does, you need a transfer to an inefficient and underfunded system. So it's like, all right, this is
It's
cool for
broken.
this small moment here, but it's not good in a large sense.
So, Tara, we know a lot about Chris from the frequency of him being on the show and also his transition into his new position. But for you, just to kind of break some of it, we'll get back into the deep questions. How did you choose this career
So
for the young ladies out there that want to be like you when they grow up?
actually, the career sort of kind of chose me. I started out as in consulting, so I was working for a transportation planning firm, and I actually thought I wanted to do.
What did you get your
sports.
degree in? So,
And so I actually went to the illustrious school of Florida Agricultural
here we
Mechanical
go.
University, one of the premier institutions of the state of Florida and the nation. So I actually got my degree in public management with environmental science specialization.
Nice.
At that
Okay.
time, actually, I had a very influential teacher at the time. It was like a former EPA worker, and she was telling the whole class about when she was working for the EPA in the Atlanta area during the 1996 Olympics.
I
And
was
so
about
at
to
that
say the
time,
Olympics was big.
it was really big. So at that time, she was telling me about the disparities that they were having when they were like creating these like really big mass systems to accommodate all the people that were coming into the city at that time, right? And so with that, there has to be some kind of like mitigations, like when you're building transportation projects, you have to make sure that you're making the environmental stuff like complete. And so what they were finding was that in the areas where there was like wealthy, affluent white persons that were living in those areas, the environmental projects that they had were done a lot better. And so in some areas, in like the more minority, low-income areas of Atlanta, there was a lot of like runoff, environmental degradation, a lot of issues. Some people had died because of flooding because they didn't really.
Oh, that's when
build
they
the projects
realized
better.
black people were going to continue to move to Atlanta. They just wasn't going to stop.
Well, at that time, it was like a really big issue, and so that's actually part of. It was a really big part of like environmental segregation and everything. And so it actually got me thinking like there's people that plan transportation, that plan roads, bridges, and all that kind of stuff. It actually got me interested. So when I went to school, I'm actually interned for a couple of different government agencies. I found work with the consulting firm that I moved down here with in Florida. I worked there for about 5 years. Again, I thought I was going to do seaports. And for some reason, luckily, I got this job working with the Florida Department of Transportation, like this contract where I was like working with transit. So I was automatically working with the people that I work with now at Miami-Dade Transit, Broward County Transit, my now boss, my Palm Tran, and Tri-Rail, like making these connections. And so, and it didn't really hit me, and I started getting more transit work through consulting. And it didn't really hit me until somebody was like introducing me to somebody at the Florida Department of Transportation. They're like, oh, Tara, yeah, she's the transit person. And I was like, I guess I am. And then I got another job working specifically for a transit planning company, and I got a lot of really good work. One of the first tasks I was working at was an interim executive director of a trolley system in Fort Lauderdale. I helped to manage a taxi voucher program for Lynx. I was actually working on a very impoverished area in Palm Beach County called Belglade, where I was working to try to improve the transit system in that area. And then I got a job with Broward County Transit. So it really became my passion, because again, it's helping me, you know, make the world a better place one person at a time, because transit is the lifeline. So
that's right. She got her little spiel,
know,
tagline. Better use it.
I don't know what public office she running for, but that's gonna work. Saving people through transit, one person at a time. Chris, what is some data that we may not be aware of that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you.
I know you're good with
you got
data.
your papers?
Yeah,
your
no,
notes?
I got my receipts, don't worry. So actually, I want to draw attention to something, the Miami Transit Alliance, which is a grassroots organizing with the Urban Impact Lab. Marta Viciero and a few other folks have come together to tell the story about mass transit in Miami. Right now, they're in the second week of a 5-week kind of data expose, and they're coming out with some of what I think is the most interesting transit data we have right now in Miami. Monday they released some information showing that about 75% of the bus lines come at frequencies of 30 minutes or greater in Miami-Dade County.
Wow.
And so, like, the biggest complaint
What
that
is it
people have.
supposed to be? What's the time frame supposed to be?
Well, it needs to be faster than that.
There's no supposed to be. It's like, is this good? Okay, this is what we can afford. This is what we're going to pay for. Fine. Okay. But if you think about like the complaints that people have, it's
Right,
like,
it's not
it
fast
doesn't
enough.
come fast enough. I sit there, I wait for whatever. If you are scheduled to have a bus there every 30 minutes, you know, in real like Miami time plus public
That's
transit
like
time,
45.
like you, yeah.
45
And
to an
so, like, they are doing such a good job of packaging the information. I just highly encourage people to follow them at Transit MIA. I think they're doing a really, really good job.
At
It's funny
Transit
because
MIA.
we know why the buses are late. So we were at our building doing
we
a
saw it
showing.
live.
We saw it live, and some people are actually getting on the bus. The bus has stopped, and you know now we got to go to net because we need the bus to be moved about
'Cause it was
50 yards
blocking the
north because
entrance
it
into
blocks
the-
our entrance.
Yeah.
And the lady's just sitting there, and we're like, "What's going on?
For a
What
good
are you
10
doing?"
minutes.
The bus?
Yeah, the
bus.
bus is just sitting there for
So
like
they,
10
They have
minutes.
certain stops they have to stay at, and like if they're
No. This was
She
strict-
was doing
no.
it on.
It was
Yeah.
because they wouldn't get behind the yellow line of where they were supposed to stand because the bus was so crowded.
So there are always situations where it's like individual employees, and there's of course,
Yeah,
but like for the most part, it's the systemic. Thing
but that
that's really
literally
what
ruined the rest of our day. We had to sit
Yeah.
there stuck.
Yeah.
So,
She
and
would
some people just had to get
not
off. But I was like, you can't just move it 10 feet forward so we can get out of the driveway. I mean, she just wouldn't do it, but she was very
And I mean,
dedicated.
legally,
That's
she
the
may not
safety-
be able to.
She's not. Yeah.
Right.
So you're on the bus and there's that yellow line at the very
Yeah, she
front.
was serious
Yeah,
about it.
You can't.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
I'm not moving this
you can't
until
do
these
that.
3 people get behind that yellow line.
And so if we
And
have
I'm
the
looking, I was like, which line you talking
issue.
about?
But it's the
Liability.
liability and the safety.
Yeah, and
issue.
so if we had more frequent transportation, maybe it wouldn't be
wouldn't
as
be so
crowded in the
crowded.
first place, right?
Because there were
So
still like maybe 20 people who could not get on the bus and had to wait for the next
Next
one
bus
to
to
come.
come. So since we're talking about these streets, Toya, why don't you go ahead and get in these streets for us?
So
We'll
but
take
in
a
these
quick break,
streets,
y'all, yeah.
so we like to do little segments to break up the conversation. And for in these streets this week, want to talk about hashtag if I were killed, if I die in a school shooting, right? So there's been a trending topic on Twitter that deals with the whole mass shooting and everything that's going on. I just wanted to kind of bring that up and get some feedback from you guys. Even though, like I said, we like to switch it up, get some different feedback because we like to sit there and see what you think outside of what you do. So with the whole situation that's going on with the school shootings, just wanted to see, have you guys been paying attention to that hashtag? Do you have any thoughts or what's kind of going on with the scenario?
So one of the issues that really affected Broward County was Parkland that happened
Right.
on February 14th of this past year. And so with that, we were actually contacted to make sure like what kind of transit opportunities we could provide for some of the marches that were occurring. And so that's the transit aspect. But are you just like asking my question over the shooting in general?
Just in general. So
Just
what's
in
happening on the hashtag is basically you have students who are hashtagging it and sharing if they were to die in a school shooting, because a lot of them are saying that they want to have their experience be politicized in order to be a part of the cause and to champion what's kind of happening with gun regulation, NRA pushback, and everything from that perspective. So that's kind of what's happening in the Twitter sphere.
What
with this
Toya really
situation.
want to know is if in this year 4 young black men had shot up 4 high schools, would the response be the same?
If I die in a school shooting, I can just know my ghost is coming back to haunt Tallahassee and D.C. because that's a petty way to go when we have just spineless, ineffective, cowardly legislators who can't stand up to Marion Hammer and the NRA lobby. It's honestly embarrassing to be a constituent in a democratically elected country in which we can't act on children getting slaughtered. I lived in Connecticut when Sandy Hook happened.
Oh, wow.
And when we decided that it was okay to slaughter 19 6-year-olds, we crossed a line. We decided that, okay, chill. And then when we decided again this last time that we could have people dodging bullets and then going to the state house 4 days later and then not even get a vote on something, we crossed another line there too. And it's only going to get harder and harder. And it's one of those things where if it had been different folks that had done it, I think we know what the narrative would have been, right? People get shot for being on cell phones in their grandmother's backyards. People get tased, even if they're basketball players, for parking sideways. Like, we know what would have happened. And ultimately, I think it's going to take multiple very, very, very dramatic situations in a short succession for anything to happen.
And it's sad to hear that, but it's very true.
I think just to counter that, if you look at most of the school shootings, because I don't want to quantify by saying all, because that's such an inclusive term, most of the school shootings have been done at primarily white institutions in wealthy areas and cities that they thought were safe. So even Parkland, like earlier that week, was voted as one of the safest cities in the United States. And so I think the question is, if a black kid had done this in a black school, would it even get as much press?
No.
So
it would probably get pressed, but it would be
not as
spent in a
much.
different way.
And so what you're saying is, if a black student did it at one of these mostly affluent schools in a high income area, that's what I think the question is.
That's
right?
when it would trigger it, yeah.
So I think that's something that would trigger, not something that would happen at like in an inner city that's mostly a minority institution by a minority student.
Right, because I mean that's the main reason why we got in the media, was to control the narrative. Because if it was a black student at Booker T. Washington, that situation would come out to be something like, once again, black on black crime, hurts an impoverished neighborhood. It's just the way they control the narrative. And they were talking about recently with the young man that committed the shooting versus another young black man. They went into the white gentleman where he was talking about, the fact that he wanted to be a Marine and all the good things. It's just the same thing. It's the happy shot versus the mug shot. And it's the way they're painted straight out the box.
It happens here too. I mean, there was a terrible, really tragic situation in Liberty City recently, and they arrested 2 people wrongly. Even after the fact that they were not, like the police department admits that they were arrested wrongly, they're still using their mug shots.
Right.
Wow.
I'm like, y'all took this mugshot for somebody that you didn't even charge. You admitted you're not going to charge him, and you're still using that picture. Like, how does that play into a narrative, and how does that become so much easier for confirmation bias when things do happen? It's like, oh, of course that happened.
And that just makes me wonder, because, we do media, so I will consider us a part of the media because we're covering stories the way we want to hear them told, and we want to have more truth. I just wonder who's actually conscious in media to make sure that they're not doing these things, because it's just so repetitive.
You have a for-profit media.
I think the other issue too is making sure that representation truly does matter. And so that's why I feel that myself working as a transit agency, it matters, because I feel like I'm representing diversity. I'm a black woman, you know what I mean? And so there's not many people that are in positions of authority. And so we were talking about the media. You have to think about what are the representation of the people that are having those stories. So even looking at Jamel Hill, Like she had a different kind of spin on sports, and it's because she's also coming from a black woman and
Right.
a
Perspective.
more diverse, inclusive viewpoint. But also coming to what you're talking about too, Charles. I think.
Chris.
Close.
My bad. I was like, I knew it was a C. My apologies. But I think another. I sort of kind of lost my train of thought then.
We're sorry. We didn't
Well,
mean
I know
that.
he was talking about,
Jamil Hill, yeah.
but he was even
he
talking
was
about
talking about-
privatized media, ad buying,
Yes.
and-
Mug shots.
But I think that
He
that's
was talking about
yeah.
mug shots. And so I think another thing too that really annoys me and is something that I noticed is that even with the Santa Fe kid, they didn't show his mug shot. They showed him as a young kid. And I think the narrative of these young like students that are killing each other, let's be truthful, they're white males. They're always pictured as, oh, they're a really good kid.
Or they were at least
You know,
trying
they
to do
were
something
a
with their life.
kid.
or it becomes
That's
a
the
mental
thing.
health issue.
Yeah.
It's a mental
and
health
Right.
issue.
Tamir
And I think
Rice isn't a
whenever
kid.
Exactly.
He's not a kid.
Who was just playing in
And
the
so I
park.
think
In an
it's
open
something-
was
carry
12
state,
or
by the
14
way.
years old or something like that.
Right,
So I think
right,
it's
right.
just also how the media even portrays like black youth versus any other youth of
Yeah.
any other race.
Right, and I think that that's also too the power of hashtags and the power of Twitter is that it is a platform for those who don't have cameras to then share their story. And you have a lot of people who are using the hashtag kind of like telling the world who they are. Like, I'm a straight A student, and just because you don't want the media to then take your story and spin it to make you and paint you as something that you are not.
But
So-
then when young black men do that, they're painted as being arrogant because they receive scholarships and applications to over
Right.
20 different universities.
The double
Fox
standards.
News.
Double
just
standards.
Can't win for nothing.
Yeah. So back to regularly scheduled programming.
Yes. So how much has technology helped improve transit planning?
Thank you. I think you looked at me, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it.
not planning.
Dante, stop laughing.
And she did it like a real panelist too. Thank you for that question. That's
I
right.
was like, check mark.
Digital Grass Town Hall.
It's real.
The technology has greatly improved
Yeah.
transit, in my opinion. So if you look at like real time ticketing, so you have apps now that show you where transit is, shows you where a train is, show you where the bus is. It lets you know, okay, well the bus is 10 minutes away, so I can like do whatever and then walk to this bus stop. Mobile ticketing, so instead of having cash, a lot of people don't have cash or anything. You can actually use your phone to get on and off a bus to go swipe your ticket. And so I think looking at those things, real-time information at bus stops, like so whenever you go, there's not that many here. Actually, I would say for even if you're using the Metro Mover,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you can actually see like, okay, how far the train is. And so I think it lessens your waiting time because you already know. I think the problem, the frustration is when you don't know when the bus is coming and then you get frustrated like, okay, when the bus is coming, like even if you think it's going to be scheduled for a certain time. And so
Right.
technology has definitely improved it in those ways, making it more convenient.
So what's going to be so is that already in action now, or is that a rollout?
We're actually working on our real-time tracking app right now. And so we're working with our vendor. Hopefully that should be rolled out. I can't give you a date on that. And we're also working on mobile ticketing. Again, I can't give you a date on that. But hopefully those should be occurring within
Do you think
the
it'll happen
fiscal
within the next 24 months?
2019, fiscal
Okay.
year
Oh, that's cool.
2019.
Well, that's not too far.
Yeah.
That's not too far.
I think it's interesting, like, and I would be curious to hear a little bit more about this because, for example, Google Maps does a really good job tracking transit. So I always find it interesting when local municipalities or counties are trying to develop apps or get people to drive, like driving traffic into a brand new application to then use to track transit.
So-
Like, if I can just open up Google Maps, like why are you co-investing when it seems like the private market has already decided there's something here, we're going to do it?
So you have to think
Always,
about
yeah.
transit primarily is owned by local governments or transit authorities, right? So it's going to be quasi-private or whatever, public, whatever you may be. And so the private industry is always going to be working a lot faster. You know, that's where you get autonomous vehicles. That's where you get Uber and Lyft. They have the money and the dollars to actually invest in all that stuff. But when you're looking at the government or quasi-public, quasi-private entities, you're looking at local monies, federal monies, like state dollars. There's a lot of stipulations that are required when you're looking at those funds, and then it's going to be finite. So you don't have where you can have a lot of private sector people or, you know, investing in that information, right? And so with that,
Hold
like
on, hold on.
Google-
Can we reformulate the question?
Okay, so my question is just so for example, if you're in a nonprofit and you have 5 services you want to provide, and there's somebody out there that's already providing one of those services really well,
Why
most
not?
places
Yeah.
you focus on the other 4. Why is public government in this case still insisting on trying to find a competing service with something that everybody else already has on their phones?
Okay, so that's dealing with open data, and so I think what what Google uses is a GTFS, which is the General Transit Feed Specification, and so it's something that all transit agencies have. Not all of them are sharing. Palm Beach, Palm Tran, Broward, and Miami-Dade Transit gives their scheduling information, which lets you know when the bus is going to come per routes by day. They give that to Google to actually update every single time they make changes for their service. Real-time information is something completely different. And so you're also looking at like cell phone data and towers, right? And that's where you can actually have your mobile phone, either a mobile phone or a smartphone, any kind of phone. It has like this energy that's transmitted that's getting to some of the cell towers, right? And so that's how some of the agencies are actually able to go say where you're going to. Unfortunately, you cannot do that for a bus, because a bus, if you're on your phone or it's tracking you on a bus, you're still in traffic. So it can't determine that your cell phone signal is coming from a bus, whereas it's coming from transit. And so it's going to be much better information for a roadway. There's much better information if you're on like a subway, a fixed guideway, because then it can actually delineate that you're on this fixed guideway traveling at this speed. Something that, people use Waze in here. How many use Waze? And so Waze is actually also like customer reported. You can actually say, I'm traveling this distance. It's letting you know that you're traveling this fast, and you can actually compute that from the cell phone signal. But again, it's really hard to do that when you're in a bus, because you're on the roadway system too. And then it can't really, because we actually talked to some
So it's no
providers that were
separation
doing
of the
that.
data itself.
No.
It's hard to separate the data.
Yes.
So it seems like you would need to have some people that would be willing to share the data to kind of check in to say, at this point, I'm getting on the bus going from this stop to another stop and
Right.
start.
Yeah,
So-
crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing the data.
Or could the drivers do it?
No.
Like, there's no real way for the drivers to.
Well, no. And then it's also looking at a lot of
So it seems like,
vendors.
Chris, y'all need to bring something where the community crowdsource their data, and maybe we could track it.
Maybe, but I guess so. I really appreciate.
But then you're also saying, think about it. A lot of the transit riders are primarily going to be low income, and
They still
so
got
they,
cell
they
phones.
might not-
can't use your app
they
anywhere,
might not
though.
even have a smartphone.
Phone to
And then
use
there's
it.
also going to be a high percentage of elderly people that still use transit. Again, they might not use a smartphone. So I think it's also being clear, like even though technology advances so much, there's still going to be a segment of the
A lag,
population that are
yeah.
not going to have access to that technology.
So then my follow-up question would be, given that, wouldn't it behoove local government to invest more in expanding services and putting money towards actually making the service good, as opposed to just talking about it?
Okay.
So
Repeat.
I agree with you that, like, a lot of transit users and transit riders aren't going to be able to access the app even if you develop it and it's perfect, right? So that app is only going to benefit a very small percentage of the people, or I don't know what percentage of the people
Correct.
who are using transportation. However, everybody who's using transportation is affected by how frequently a bus comes.
Correct.
So when local government chooses to prioritize the app over the actual service for at least like a relatively not knowledgeable person, that gets frustrating, because it's like, okay, you didn't have money for my line, but you had money for this app that I may or may not be using.
So I'm glad you said that. So there's different budget lines for any kind of like transit authority or transit agency. And so it's not that we're prioritizing this, it's that, the truth is that ridership is declining. And so you have to look at how to not only retain your existing ridership, because people are not very loyal, right? But also making sure that we're attracting new riders. And another thing is that, remember, we're working with finite money. So the difference with Miami-Dade, y'all have a half-penny sales tax that's helping to fund your transit. Broward County has no stable, dedicated source of funding to fund transit. Palm Tran has no stable, dedicated funding source to fund transit. And so with this, you're already operating at a shortfall. And so you have to think about voting for transit if you're going to be supporting it, correct? And so if you're looking at resources, and also think about what I said earlier, it's like a coverage-based system, depending on more of a network coverage system. You have to think about the competing interests of that. So there's always going to be winners and losers for every kind of system you're having. So if you're living out in the suburbs or something, or if you're living far out west, that's another issue dealing with social equity. Why are you living out west? Why are you not living closer to the core? Why? Because rent has dramatically risen in the last like 15, 20 years in Miami-Dade and also Fort Lauderdale. So a lot of the quote-unquote affordable housing is going to be pushed out to the more western portions.
So hold on,
Now,
you
the
said
western-
one thing about legislation, was one of our questions.
Okay.
So what legislative or legal things are slipping through the cracks that people may not be aware of that are controlled by voting?
There's so much. I feel like one thing that really frustrates me is that a lot of us, people our age, not you here, we don't vote. We don't vote. We're not in our local HOAs. We're not in our neighborhood coalitions. We're not voting within the community. We want to vote for the president because we think that matters. It does. But what also matters more are your local elections.
Yep.
How many people are going to vote for the primaries that's coming up? That's going to be like next month, right? How many people are actually going to go vote for the midterm elections that's coming up in 2018? That matters. It matters for if we're talking about school shootings. It matters if you're voting to retain your DA, voting to retain your judge. Like, you have to actually research and say, well, why do I want to retain this judge? Are they voting or are they weighing on matters that's meaningful to me? Why am I going to vote for it? So I feel like there's so many layers of government that we can actually vote on. There's NPOs, there's all these surveys, there's a lot of community meetings that are had. People do not come. And so I think people prioritize that. But it's also where a lot of these public meetings are not really going to be in a time or location that's consistent and conducive to a lot of people.
That makes
A lot of
sense.
people work multiple jobs. And so it's making sure that you have those different elements for people to go reach in and reach back out. And so that's the hard thing, is making sure that when we are doing our public outreach and making sure we're engaging people.
Right. So I was going to ask to that question, what are you doing to make sure that the public outreach does reach the people who actually use the transportation? Like, are there pamphlets going to be on the bus about what's going to be on the ballot for November? Like, what's sort of the plan for that? I don't know if you know, because that maybe not be your area, but
So
what's the plan?
again, June 5th, the county commission is going to be voting. At that point, our marketing group is going to be outlining a marketing plan that's going to touch. We're actually going to be looking at talking to every single municipality within the county for Broward, my county. So we're going to be doing extensive public outreach for that.
Is there a marketing plan to actually market and put material directly on the buses itself
For
for the voting?
Like
Because
info pamphlets.
this is the thing. If you're going into the rich communities and you're going to the people that aren't taking the transit, you're kind of missing the point, because it's not affecting them as much.
But I remember it is affecting everybody. This is not a transit surtax, it's a transportation surtax.
Okay.
So there's elements where transportation, so road users, people that have private vehicles, they're getting benefit. There's also benefits where people that ride transit are getting benefit. And so what the county can do, because this is something that we're putting on the ballot, we really can't market it. We're going to be educating the public. And so it's a
But is
different-
that going to be on the actual transit system? Will it be on the buses? Will it be on Brightline? Will this content be available?
Brightline is, remember, something separate.
Okay.
So, but
I
with
just
the
think
content on
it's one of the
buses.
things. Sometimes the communities that are affected the most are the least informed. So I just hope that's something that's fixed.
So I've been on thousands of buses in Miami-Dade County. Not once have I ever gotten a survey while I was on a bus. And there are people that ride the bus every day and never get surveyed. And it's just the craziest and wildest thing that you have
Right.
13 people on a dais who probably couldn't even tell you how much a bus costs, deciding,
right.
billions
That's
of
what
dollars.
the question was.
And in there's actually a special election in Miami-Dade County on Tuesday of this week for District 5 Commission, 13% voter turnout. The Miami-Dade County Commission controls a $7 billion budget. We had an opportunity to elect somebody that would be one of 13 votes. Like, the sheer purchasing power and the distance that your vote goes locally is just not, I don't think it's fully understood or
Yeah.
appreciated all the time. There was a very, very publicly pro-mass transit candidate on the ballot who actually won the first round, and there's going to be a runoff on June 19th, and we'll see who kind of emerges. But I think that it's just like we get so wrapped up in national politics, and we get so wrapped up in the latest Trump drama or the latest like kind of federal situation that's extremely polarizing, that we kind of miss what's happening at home. And when I say we, I mean communities that don't necessarily have access to the information or who don't have people intentionally catering to them, except a week from election day when they turn out for souls to polls and all of a sudden want certain votes.
Yeah.
Being plugged in for special elections, being plugged in for these other things here actually increases the likelihood that your community is going to have a bigger voice all year, not just the week before an election.
I think we're going to have a whole nother conversation about voting and
voter
this.
education.
But with that being said, talking about your soul, For today's ignorance, we'll go ahead and do this before we get into the quick six. Our quick six is just going to be 6 questions we'll ask you guys, and you give about a 4 to 8 word
A
response.
tweetable response.
4 to 8. Okay.
Yeah, it's real.
I'm very verbose. I'll try.
Yeah, I know. That's why we want to. I'm letting that sink into your mind while we do for today's ignorance. But for today's ignorance is going to go to the NFL for making players stand during the national anthem.
Or you can stay in the locker room.
From Commissioner Roger Goodell. Well, I'll explain to you why I'm saying that instead of good, because there's nothing good in you. You want to be God yourself. We believe today's decision will keep our focus on the game and the extraordinary athletes that play it and our fans who enjoy it. I just want you guys to know about 85% of the NFL are black males. Black males that normally went to Division I schools where they were auctioned off like slaves to play and not to focus on their education because they didn't have any time to actually study or do anything in education. They average around 40 to 60 hours a week with just the practice itself. So you tell me how easy it is to actually get an education when you're there. Nor do they have the abilities to just stay in school and to continue their education just in case they never make it into the NFL, but that's a whole nother story. First, this is what I think should happen to you, Mr. Roger Goodell. Everyone in the stands should just sit when the national anthem is playing. Nobody should stand up because actually you shouldn't be taking away people's First Amendment rights. Someone should bring a loud boom box just like LL Cool J used to have and play Lift Every Voice and Sing right as the national anthem comes on. I think everybody should learn to lyrics of Lift Every Voice and Sing because we do know there's a lot of racism that actually occurs in the other stanzas of the national anthem. Players should wear black gloves on one hand and white gloves on the other hand and just hold your fist up while they're actually playing the national anthem. DeMaurice Smith, the CEO of the NFLPA, I expect something great of you. If you're looking out for our players, make sure that you're actually going to having a real conversation with Roger Goodell because he obviously does not care about the black men that are a majority of the actual people that are making him billions of dollars for his organization known as the NFL. I would like to say that is for trade. You can figure out what the N would stand for. Is there any other job beyond the armed forces that make you stand for the national anthem? I don't remember having to go to my job and standing up for the national anthem at the beginning of my workday. And pretty much if they told me to stand, I would tell them to kiss my... But we can go ahead and move on to the next part. Next, are you going to be able to point out to the sky and thank God as you catch that everlasting play? Are you going to be able to thank God? Are you going to be able to even pray on the field? Because I thought getting down on your knees was actually something sacred. So now that we're actually saying that we're asking for forgiveness and we're asking for you to understand the sympathy of what black men are going through due to the fact that when I go and get an oil change, I see an 18-year-old black male sitting across from me and the only thing I'm going to ask him is, are you okay? How does it feel to be a black man in today's society? And his response is, actually, it's not too bad. I'm driving a Lexus GS 300. I live in Weston. But you know what? White people are crazy and I don't really feel comfortable. It made me uncomfortable to hear a 18-year-old say that. And I'm asking you, why do you feel this way, young man? He said, well, I drive a Lexus, and ever since I got this Lexus, I've been pulled over 4 times, but I've never been pulled over for speeding. My friend just got pulled over in his Mercedes and had weed planted on him. He's never smoked weed a day in his life. This is in Weston, very close to Parkland, somewhere we would consider a safe city. But you know what, Roger Goodell, you don't see what's going on with the cops and between young black men. They're actually at a point where they're scared. They're scared from the people that are supposed to be there to protect them and look out for them. Roger, there's a reason why Colin Kaepernick wanted to get down on his knees. And I think a lot of people should remember, Colin is no different than Muhammad Ali was. You praise Muhammad Ali right now because he's silenced. He's not talking. And when he wasn't talking, that's when you loved him the most. But as Muhammad Ali said, he had his rights. He was standing up for people. They didn't like Jackie Robinson. Granted, the Major League Baseball has a season where everybody wears the number 42 and they have that day, and it's rejoiced about Jackie Robinson. But guess what? They weren't loving Jackie Robinson the same way, and everybody wasn't wearing the number 42 at that point. Steve Kerr's response to the NFL's decision, what is exactly wrong with the country today. Roger Goodell, your decision is exactly what's wrong. The division that you're creating with the sensitivity to being a black man in America, with the mass shootings that have been happening against us by the ones that are supposed to be here to protect us, is why we have the feelings we have. I had to give a speech to about 50 to 70 young black students in Bay County to congratulate them for things they couldn't celebrate because that was really in the heart of the KKK. Where I grew up was also known as Redneck Riviera. And 29 years ago, they started this dedication to celebrate all of the students that graduate in schools in Bay County. And to have to sit on that stage and cry as I spoke to black men, and the only thing I can tell to them, to those young black men that were in that room, just come back home alive. Be smart and be mindful. I wasn't worried about them killing each other. I was worried about them actually being killed by police officers because they had a bad day or made a wrong decision, or they were coming home a little tipsy, or just like T.I., they were simply trying to get into their own house. I don't remember the last time somebody white got arrested for trying to get into their own house or into their own neighborhood. Certain things in this community we cannot ignore anymore, and certain things can't stop. To Roger Goodell, I will not be watching any of your games. Sundays will be full with a lot more laughter and entertainment, sitting around with my friends. I will not be able to enjoy Monday Night Football, and the Super Bowl will be a weekend where my TV will not even be on, so Nielsen can't confuse whether I even accidentally scroll through to one of those stupid commercials that come on during the Super Bowl. You have lost a lot of people in your decision, and to all the owners, you should be very, very ashamed of yourself. And I wonder how you go to work every day and look at those black men that are sacrificing their bodies and their brains with CT scans and actually leaving your league brain damaged to make you money as you sit on the sidelines and goth over their heavenly built bodies. And all you could say was a unanimous vote that they should have to stand for a national anthem as their peers continue to get killed in the streets. It's not for life. I'm not going to be watching the NFL anymore, and I hope a lot of people understand why these decisions are being made. But for today's ignorance, Roger Goodell is good for you. So that's the rant for today. Just had to get that off my chest. And as a previous football player and somebody that has seizures and not sure if it came from football or just came from birth, means a lot to me. Selfish ass mother. So we're going to go ahead and move into our quick six. If you guys had to pick the perfect song to be playing on the bus as people rode around Broward County and Dade County, what would that song be?
I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so I don't know. I can't
just go to your heart, whatever your first song that came up.
Waka Flocka Flame, No Hands.
All right.
It's my crunk song.
The bus gonna be
Real
live.
true.
It's gonna be crunk.
I don't have a good answer. It wouldn't be an appearance on Digital Grass without shouting out Cardi B. So,
I was about to say,
yeah.
I mean, when I would think you would say, "Be careful with me." That's what I hear.
I would actually, I think that would be a good one. I would go with that one, or I Like It, the one with the Tito Puente remix.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Oh, 'Cause I'm Happy. That's a nice song for a bus.
No, you were fine with your Waka Flocka choice.
Politically correct. That's
We
more
can't be politically correct. We can't.
Okay.
Don't be
This
trying
is
to get all
family. This
happy. Don't be
family.
trying to fix it out. Go.
For you, what do you see the future of transit being beyond your 3-year plan? Beyond that, in 10 years, what does transit look like?
Transit's going to be for everybody. It provides mobility and accessibility, and it'll be truly providing mobility and accessibility for all.
They was clapping for you back there.
I think you're either going to have an investment in the public goods that needs to be made, or you're going to have a dystopian situation where people just have to dramatically change their lives, and where our current constraints and understandings of how transportation works changes in a way that just isn't feasible for most people.
Could autonomous cars help South Florida?
No.
Could they help? Could they help? Anything could help, man. I think it's really hard to start thinking about the future. I think autonomous cars are interesting because we're not okay with robots killing humans yet. Even though they'll be more efficient than humans and less people will die, we're cool if somebody gets into a car accident and kills somebody else. When a robot kills us, that's going to really freak some people out, and we just don't have like the public policy, and we don't have the understanding of what that really means to actually implement it as quickly as it comes. But even if it does come, it's still going to have congestion. You're going to have more people on the roads. It's not a silver bullet type situation, but it will dramatically change work. It'll put truck drivers out of work. It'll have a huge economic dislocation.
Okay, that's a quick six.
It's
so
a really
I'm going to let
important
you go because you're speaking so fast. Go ahead.
3 seconds. Okay, really quickly, congestion is not a bad thing. If anybody remembers living down here in 2009, 2010, when the economy like burst and it was the recession, there was like no traffic on the roads. You didn't get to a lot of places. You got to a lot of places really quickly. So congestion is actually an indicator of a thriving economy. And so whenever because people are going
That's
to and from
correlation,
work,
though.
going to and
That's
from,
not causation.
But I'm saying it's an indicator. I never said it was a causation, but I said it's an indicator. But I'm just saying for people that lived here in 2000,
I'm going to have to write these words down and look them up later. Correlation,
right. So
causation.
congestion is actually good. It's just how to manage it.
Town hall. Go ahead, Toya.
Right. Where was I going to go? You threw me off with your 3 seconds.
Quick 6.
I know. I had a question, and it was a good one, too. Do yours, and I'll come back, because I lost it.
All right. If you could fix one route, Miss Crawford, one route, Chris, if you could fix one route right now where you could get from one destination to another destination flawlessly, what would that point A to point B be?
It would have to be some kind of east-west connectivity. I think it would be really great. There was a time when there was there was a time when there were 4 routes that connected South Beach to downtown. We're down to 3. I would bring back the 4th route and just do an express only from the front of American Airlines Arena to Lincoln Road. Those are the only stops.
So for me in Broward County, it would be on Oakland Park Boulevard. That's our Route 72. It's actually our highest ridership corridor. It's heavily congested with traffic. And so making sure that we get a lot of good technology, making sure there's bus priority signals, that's making sure when the bus is at the red light that it goes ahead to sort of kind of void some of that traffic issues. Maybe having some bus access traffic lanes. And so something I think that can be really cool that hasn't really been done down here is actually having like one lane that's dedicated for public transit, either transit as well as like Uber, Lyft, ride sourcing, carpooling. That's going to be
people don't even like to pull over here for ambulances and stuff. So I don't know if you're going to get that. Somebody can be dying and they're not going to.
Orlando has done this really well. Anybody's been downtown Orlando, they actually have the green lanes as dedicated for their buses. And so I think that's something that can hopefully be implemented here within the next 10 years or so.
Right.
So this wasn't my question, but since you talked about Orlando, if you could live in any city in the world, where would it be and why?
I live here in Miami. So I actually love Miami. If I could live anywhere in the world. In the world. Where would it be and why? I don't know. I think America's great as a black woman. So I'd either say Miami in the wintertime and D.C. in the summer.
I would want to live in Miami, but a Miami that is inclusive of everybody's talent and where opportunities are as robust as the talent in our communities that are there.
So Chris, who said we got brain drain? They want to stay.
Yeah, I mean, okay. But Chris, when you running for office? That's my last question. What office are you going to run?
I'm really happy where I am. For now.
That boy stay on point. All right. I think I asked you 2 back to back. I think you were going to have to close out.
Last question. I don't know if we've ever asked you this one. We may have, but you could just give a different answer since you're in a different position now. 5 years from now, what headline do you want to see on the Miami Herald?
Headline in the Miami Herald?
The perfect headline in the Miami Herald. Or the Sunset.
Or Sunset, no, because you're Broward.
What is Palm Beach?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Palm Beach Post.
The perfect headline.
Perfect headline for transit. You open up the newspaper or you pull up your phone. What's the perfect headline where you know you've accomplished everything you want to accomplish?
Light rail has opened, and we're actually having the east-west corridors, north-south corridors in Broward County with connectivity to the airport. That will be feeding into the bus network, so that would be great.
Okay.
Something to the effect of we have passed a comprehensive bond for the entire Miami-Dade County that'll fund mass transit for us and our children.
Nice.
Well, guys, we're listening, and whatever topics you feel need to be covered, we are trying to cover more of those topics as long as it's relating to innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. But we wanted everybody to know it's not just about tech, but tech normally affects everything we talk about in some way, shape, or form. And for transit, it's very important to us, especially with some of our partners and business people living in Broward County and just being able to get back and forth to locations to conduct business. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for watching Tech Beats and Bytes. And thank you to the Knight Foundation, Digital Grass, World Famous House of Mac, Cosmology, Timeline Brewery, and Junction Halls and Junction 2027. And Pop Soul Popcorn. All right. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week.